All right, everybody, wrapping up this crossover Thursday edition. Locked on Chiefs, Locked on Saints, brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks, where you can head today. You're going to be able to get $50 instantly when you play $5 by using the promo code Locked On NFL when you download the PrizePicks app. Here to break down the Chiefs and the Saints' keys to victory for this matchup, what it is that they need to do to get a win. So, I'll start us off here with the away team stuff. I'll give you my three. We'll go Chris's three, and then we'll kind of break them down. But my three are pretty simple. We're looking to see if the New Orleans Saints can protect Derek Carr, give him some comfort, give him some time. That's got to be number one. Number two is that they need to be able to generate a pass rush over on the other side and maybe stop that comfort, maybe stop and throw off some of that timing for Patrick Mahomes in the offense. And then the final thing for me is that the Saints just have to be out of their own way. One of the biggest issues for New Orleans so far this season is that they haven't just been playing against the opponent across from them. They've had to play against themselves, and they've typically beat themselves on the wrong side of that conversation. So for me, Chris, those are the three things that New Orleans is going to have to do to even sniff the idea of an upset here.
And, I could basically copycats exactly what you said, because really you look at this game, and one of the things I looked at before we started was the Chiefs are -4 in turnover differential. And that doesn't seem like that's a lot, but considering you've only played 4 games, that's not great.
Yeah.
And the only teams below them are the 2-2 Raiders, the 2-2 Philadelphia Eagles, and the 1-3 Tennessee Titans. So you have all teams that don't have a winning record, and somehow the Chiefs are at 4-0, even though they've turned the ball over more than they've gotten it back. That's a huge problem. And when you talk about beating themselves, that's what I mean by beating themselves. Patrick Mahomes has thrown a pick in every single game. Carson Steele's put the ball on the ground twice. So that's something to watch for, although I don't know he's going to be starting in this game. He may not even really play that much in this game, considering it looks like Kansas City is kind of trying to move to Kareem Hunt based on what they did last week. And if Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back and Samaje Perine is still available, maybe Carson Steele is going to be just a fullback and not really get the carries like it looked like he was going to do it early in the season. And then the big question is what's the Chiefs offensive line going to do? And can Patrick Mahomes start to trust their offensive line? Because the reality of going back and watching film with this team is he doesn't trust his offensive line, and it shows. Just about every single play that he is flushed out of the pocket, I take that back. Before last week, just about every play he was flushed out of the pocket, there was real pressure. Last week, you started to see happy feet where there wasn't necessarily pressure. He was expecting it to be coming, but he could have stayed there and made a different throw or looked downfield. And that's a problem. You have to trust your offensive lineman, and the Chiefs' offensive line really hasn't gotten it done. And it doesn't show in stats on PFF as much, but if you go watch the film, you'll watch the left side of the offensive line caving more often than not, and that is a severe problem.
Yeah, that's big. It's interesting. I think about how good this Kansas City defense has been, but part of that turnover ratio conversation where the New Orleans Saints have right now a +3 when it comes to their turnover ratio, just to compare the two here, is that the Kansas City Chiefs defense, the Kansas City Chiefs have only forced 3 turnovers so far. So interesting in that situation. New Orleans has forced 8 turnovers, one of the top in the NFL when it comes to that count at the moment. So
which doesn't sound good for Kansas City.
That doesn't sound great for Kansas City. That sounds a lot better for New Orleans than most of the things that I think of off the top of my head when I think about this matchup. And I think that like so much of this conversation sometimes too is like a conversation of reputation, right? Oh, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that carries some weight though, because there's, especially in a primetime environment, I get to experience Arrowhead Stadium for the first time, and I get to experience it at a primetime game. Incredible. Like, it's a tough environment to go in and win, that's for sure. But there are these little places where maybe you can see kind of the cracks in the foundation where the New Orleans Saints might be able to take advantage of something. Is that hopeful thinking? Is that like wishful thinking, or is there like a real vulnerability here?
Well, if you go back and watch, or if you go back and look at the Chiefs games, the Baltimore Ravens game, they almost lost and probably could have lost, I guess, if you look at it, because Likely basically comes down with like an inch of his shoe over the line, and they were going to go for 2. So could have had a loss there. The pass interference call, which I think most people would agree was a good call, puts the game in Kansas City's favor in that situation. And, you know, you look at the Falcons game, there was another pass interference call the drive before the final. Right. And I mean, there's just lots of different things that Kansas City is, you know, 1 or 2 plays away from being in a much worse situation record wise. And when you look at the injuries that they have, it would make sense for them to be in a much worse situation record wise. The issue that works in their favor is they have Andy Reid as their head coach, although that can also work against them at times, specifically if they get up early on somebody. But the other part of it is they have Steve Spagnuolo, and this defense has been lights out when it has mattered most. Chris Jones has played very well. The only time that he really hasn't played great, I think, was against the Falcons, where I think he only had 2 pressures, which was surprising because the Falcons had offensive linemen that were missing. The same type of thing that'll happen with the Saints, it sounds like, this week. And you expect a guy that is, you know, wants to be the defensive player of the year, and I think has the talent to be defensive player of the year at times, to dominate those types of performances, especially considering they allow him to move around on the defensive line and basically line up where he wants to.
Right. Yeah, there's something about the Atlanta Falcons. For whatever reason, whenever their offensive line is hurt, they perform much better. Maybe they should reconsider who their starters are in those situations, but that seems to be the case for them. I don't know what that's all about.
It's just really weird because Cousins doesn't move. Like, he is such a statue in the pocket. You would think that that's going to be a problem, and somehow it just wasn't. So, you know, something to watch. I'm really going to be curious to see how this game turns out, because there's a ton of speed that the Saints have, and obviously injuries can play into this, and we don't really know where those are going to be at this point, since it's a Monday night game. But, you know, Kansas City is in a situation where if they can find a way to get to 5-0, they have their bye week and they can regroup. They can try to figure things out going into a game against the San Francisco 49ers. And if you're sitting there at 5-0, you feel a lot better going up against the 49er team. And even if you drop to 5-1, you still feel great going into a much easier part of the schedule after the Saints and the Niners.
Yeah. This is a big part of it's so funny how much this aligns between the Chiefs and the Saints. The Saints schedule gets remarkably easier after this game and then their next game up against Tampa. And then after that, it gets a little bit easier depending upon what Denver ends up looking like. I know that defense has played really well over there, but the offense has been pretty putrid and very un-Sean Payton-like. But for New Orleans, going into this game, like, this is a narrative-changing game for them. It's one of the reasons why I say that maybe a little bit of the kind of desperation and charge that could potentially come from this game could work in New Orleans' favor. This one is one of those matchups for New Orleans where, like, if they come off these 2 more disappointing and in some ways fluky losses, because there's a lot of conversation about how the opposite of what you just talked about, to where you were saying, like, yeah, Kansas City's 4-0 now, but they could be much worse. A lot of people look at the New Orleans Saints and say, man, they're 2-2, but they could be much better if 1 or 2 things roll their way. So which one of these teams gets the good fortune to break their way might actually be the thing. Beyond the injuries, beyond the trenches, beyond the pass rush, all that other stuff, it just might be who gets the break in this one that ends up having the lasting impact on the win-loss records.
Well, and you talk about games that are coming up. The Raiders, Bucks, and the Broncos follow the 49ers after the Saints game. So it is going to be a little bit easier. Obviously, the Bucks are a better team than I would have thought that they were going to be. But
sure.
Going up against a team, against the Raiders that don't really have a QB to speak of, I feel a little bit better about than going up against a team that, obviously, I think the Saints can be a good team. And you're right. They're just a couple of plays away. You take away that Dallas Goedert touchdown, that Dallas Goedert catch. That game is completely different. And I will admit, I didn't think Koo had a chance at making that field goal. So I did not think he had that leg.
Yeah. I think it's my fault. I don't think I've ever seen that guy miss a field goal. So I blame that. I blame that all on myself. So Chris, what do you think about a prediction for this matchup? Where are you going with this one?
For me, I think that this is I feel better about this game than I probably have felt against the Chargers game. And I say that because, like I said earlier, they know Derek Carr. They have a pretty good idea of how to defend him. The thing that is curious to me, and that I'm really curious to see what the Saints do, is, Olave, does he play? If he plays, changes things for me. Kamara can change things as well. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be hurt for the Saints, so that tends to favor Kansas City in some regard. But if they can't get pass rush and they allow Derek Carr to sit back there, he's going to find openings. He's not incapable of being a good quarterback. It's just a question
Right.
of can he get it done on game day? And the Chiefs have had to blitz a lot, and that can be a problem,
Mm-hmm.
especially going up against a veteran quarterback. So to me, I think Kansas City still finds a way to win this game. My bigger thing is that I would wish that I could feel like the Chiefs would score, 27, 28 points. I don't know that they're
Sure.
going to get that done. So I'm going to go 24-20 Kansas City.
Very close to me. I think this game really, there's a world in which this game goes either way. And I think it comes down to, can the Saints run the ball? Can the Saints not run the ball? In addition to some of our trench talk that we've spoken about, if the Saints can't run the football, I think this is 23-20 in favor of the Chiefs. If the Saints can run the football and control the clock and kind of do some of the things that they did over the course of the first 2 weeks with being a little bit more explosive, then obviously it's a bit of a different conversation, maybe 23-20 the other way. But as of right now, based on not knowing the health of this team, I think this is Kansas City game 23-20. So I would take the Saints against the spread, but not necessarily taking the Saints to pull off the full on upset in this one. So that's the way that I'm looking at it as well.